When Soviets came to power in Central Asia, one of the things that they had to face was a problem of establishing new nations. It is not that people didn't exist in that region, it's quite the opposite. They had a culture that was not only older than Soviet culture, but in fact even older than Russian culture itself. And of course, Islam was a huge part of its culture and identity. Facing that problem, the Soviet government decided to establish its power through rewriting a history of this nation, excluding religion, or by presenting it as a factor of bourgeois oppression. Following that agenda, they started to implement ethnicity in architecture. The idea was to combine new Soviet architecture, which turned neoclassical by the 30s by the way, and some of the traditional elements of local culture, so that the mix would give off the idea of inseparability of any local culture and Soviet world. These are some of the examples that are using ethnic ornaments of people of Central Asia. But of course, Islam, still being a big part of so-called ethnic culture, couldn't just vanish away, and Soviet government had to recognize it. Dome, traditional element of Islamic architecture, especially of the masjids, started to appear on some of structures of Soviet Central Asia. For example, this is Chorsu Bazar in Tashkent, built in 1980 and which is still operating today. Or Central State Museum of the Republic of Kazakhstan, which has a big central dome and several towers along the perimeter. It is quite interesting to see structures that are so close to consider Islamic architecture made by an atheist state. But I think the most bizarre building of them all will be Pioneer's Palace in Almaty, Kazakhstan. From afar, it looks like a mosque that was built in USSR in the center of the city. But in fact, that is just a coincidence, although a coincidence that wouldn't be possible without Soviets' game with ethnic identity. You see, the tower is of course not a minaret, but an observatory tower. This was originally supposed to be a space museum, so from the top the project resembles a swirled shape of a galaxy. But then demand for Pioneer Palace came in Almaty, so it was moved entirely there. Now to make it even funnier, I have to shortly explain what a Pioneer's Palace is. It is a Soviet concept. Basically, it is a building for any sort of activities for school children, educational clubs, small theater, etc. Children will go there usually after school for any type of workshop activities. That was an Enlightenment idea of USSR to educate the youth. This fact makes the story even more wicked, as one of the main sources of education for the youth in USSR now resembles the masjid, the very thing that they were fighting against. At the time it was built, there was no criticism about its similarity with mosque, since average Soviet citizen in Central Asia was already familiar with such Frankensteins. But seeing this today, keeping in mind all of the fight against religion that was done by the USSR, gives me a strange sense of irony. If you wish to find out more about Central Asia, please leave a like and follow.